Hello and welcome to the Animals in the Bible Study podcast. Today we're beginning to be looking at a small section of a section you wouldn't think we would go through, but it has animals, so we're going through it. We're going through a small section of the law codes regarding eating of certain foods. And so we're going to be going to chapter 11, verse 13 through 19 of Leviticus. And these you shall regard an abomination among birds, that they shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, the kite, and the falcon after its kind. Every raven after its kind, the ostrich, the short-eared owl, the seagull, the hawk after its kind, the little owl, the fisher owl, and the screech owl, the white owl, the jackdaw, and the carrion vulture, the stork and the heron, its kind, the hoop, and the bat. Now, of course, the bat is not a bird, but it's referencing, of course, anything that was a flying creature. Now, why would God disallow the eating of most of these animals, especially when the birds we read from? Well, a lot of these birds feed on things that were themselves unsanitary or considered unclean, like mice, crustaceans, shellfish, uh, rodents. All those were unclean animals that a lot of these birds ate. They also tend to be very unsanitary animals, much more in such a way that you interact with a lot of diseases when you come in contact with them. They're easily susceptible to disease, um, and they also feed on other things that were not permissible, especially rotting flesh and blood, right? Flesh that was rotting and blood were big, huge forbidden parts in the Jewish culture. And uh, it was unclean to eat and drink blood. So, all these made these animals unclean. And a lot of these animals lived in very unsanitary lifestyles, um, living in feeding among feces. A lot of these birds actually vomit as a defense mechanism. So it was so there were probably a lot of good reasons for which why a lot of these birds especially were considered unclean. But right, and they ingested especially things that were unclean, making them unclean, and the law, same thing with the law affirms. If it was considered unclean by God, and you ingest it, it made you unclean. However, right, that was merely a demonstration of the uncleanliness of our own hearts and our own stomach. Um, we tend to think, right, our mind and our stomach are very attached, right, in a lot of culture, right? What we put into our mind, we want to ingest in terms of either physically or spiritually, right? Well, if we go over to Matthew and we go to Matthew chapter 15, verses 8 and then 11. So verses Matthew 15:8 and then Matthew 15:11. These people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are from me. Now what goes into the mouth defiles the man, but what comes out of the mouth defiles the man. And then verse 17. Do you not understand? Whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and is eliminated, but those things which proceed out of the mouth from the heart, they defile a man. So, What we see there is clearly what matters more to God is not so much what we eat. That the birds of the air, they're just eating what they eat as a means of living, of having food for themselves, and are able to adjust it and cleanse themselves, basically. They, a lot of these birds rely on special bacteria and very strong stomach acid to break down all those rotting flesh and blood and make themselves clean and actually make the environment clean. But so what's worse? The animals that eat the unclean things and then produce a clean result for the world and the environment and for us, who out of our stomachs, out of our hearts, out of our minds, uh, vomit back out through our mouths unclean things. What we say toward others, the vile things that we say, things that hurt, the things that destroy, right? The Bible also says Matthew 12:34, brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Right? And so then going even further on, Titus 1:11, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert households, teaching things they ought not for the sake of dishonest gain. And then if we see what it speaks on the tongue, for he who loves life and sees good in him, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. James 3:5, even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And James, and then the next verse, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members, it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature and is set on fire by hell. So we see just how destructive the our tongues can be. And so that is our warning for today, that we can be more unclean than the vulture, that we can make ourselves more unclean by our words than what goes into the stomach of a vulture, or say lion, or Komodo dragon, for instance, if you know anything about those, right, that live vilely, eating rotten flesh and feasting and have bacteria in their mouth and possible venom, right? All those things are way worse. So my warning to you is be wary of what you speak. And you may find yourself worse than a vulture. Than what the vulture eats. And there you are. That's all I have. Have a wonderful day. And instead, learn to curb your tongue and speak good things.